I'm going to help you understand a bit more about that. I used to have that problem once. I used to have it as well. Okay, so meet our little dog. He's going to show you something. So imagine if we're walking down the road and I'm walking with you and we see this dog coming down the road, coming towards us, off the lead, and the next minute you see that I've jumped onto a wall away from the dog and I'm in fear of the dog. Okay? You're looking up at me like I'm strange because you're not in fear of the dog. So, it can't be the dog that is creating the problem. Normally, you'd say it's because Ian's afraid of the dog. But is it? Is that the problem? Is it my fear of the dog that is the problem? Or is it my belief about the dog? Remember I said to you earlier, you can't trust those beliefs. Can't trust them, okay? So in that situation, it doesn't mean that although you're looking at me like I'm strange, it doesn't mean that you love dogs, but you're not jumping on the wall at the same time as me, in the same way as me. So the reason you're not jumping on the wall is because you believe something different about the dog that I don't believe, right? So what if, first of all, I could copy your belief? Wouldn't mean I love the dog, but it would mean I wouldn't have to jump on the wall, okay? So in that situation, I'm looking into this environment and I'm seeing the theme of threat or fear of danger. And I'm avoiding the threat, and that's why I've jumped on the wall. Okay? In that same situation, you may have a different emotion. You may have an emotion which is a personal rule about dogs being off their lead. So you don't jump on the wall. You're looking for the owner to remonstrate with the owner. How dare they have their dog off the lead, etc., etc. You see, so in the same situation, different beliefs lead to different emotions. Right? So you can see that we're doing this stuff all the time. But because we don't know it's about what we believe, we're kind of a pawn to it. Different beliefs lead to different emotions. I'm going to give you another example of that later on. So when people say, it makes me feel, it's probably the most inaccurate thing you can say. It's your belief that makes you feel, not the situation. Anybody not with that? No? But you'll notice we're not told that currently. You know, when you read the media, etc., they're always telling you that things create people's problems, but it's not. It doesn't work like that. I don't mean necessarily in a real fear situation. If somebody comes at you with an axe, yes, fear is relevant, right? But it's not relevant in other situations. Is somebody asking a question then? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if it's relevant now or at the end, but I always get confused, or sometimes get confused between fear and intuition. Will that be addressed?
Yeah, I mean, usually intuition is negative. Usually. Fear is usually a negative thought. It always gives you generates negative thought. No, notice it generates a negative thought. In fact, it generates thinking, which you can observe because it's very common in that theme of the emotion. It's just that we haven't learnt it like that. But that's how I usually help people understand what emotion they're having on the basis of the types of thoughts they're having. Because they're all the same if you're in fear. They're all the same. Or you'll have a combination of 5 different thoughts if you're in fear. Okay, so just to summarize then. I was in the emotion anxiety, the theme being threat or fear of danger, right? That can be realistic, right? So if I didn't like the dog, but I didn't jump on the wall, then my fear would be realistic. Because it was unrealistic, I was in anxiety, I was thinking different things, and that led to a different response, right? So you can either be in a realistic response or an unrealistic response to something that you don't like. You can be in either of them. The problem is you don't know that you can do the other one. That makes sense? So anger is much the same. You can be in anger or you can be in, which means you see the personal rule and you're then kicking off about the rule, or you can be realistic and be in annoyance. Annoyance is a very different way of responding to something you don't like. But you don't always realize you have the choice because you've learned about this before. The back of your head, the amygdala at the back of your head is kicking off and it's generating a response that actually is very, very rarely goal related, unless you're in a real threat situation. Okay, so notice I'm introducing you to your options. You can either be this or you can be that, but sometimes your automatic response is the most undesirable. That's the problem. Okay, so now a little bit of mental exercise for you, just quickly, just to cement the learning, okay? So I'm going to take you back to the colours. There should have been a colour slide there. And I just want you to observe the colours and answer these questions, right? In your groups, you can confer, right? Which colour would likely to have a favourite emotion of anger or frustration? Which colour would have the favourite emotion, anger or frustration, in the circumstances where tasks are progressing too slowly? What colour? It's not that hard, is it? Okay, next one then. Which colour would have a problem with anger because something was not done according to the rules? Blue. This is good, you can do it without me even showing you them, right? Which colour would have anxiety because they're worrying about what peers think of them? Green. Very good, you see? Which colour would be worrying about what others think of what they have done? Somebody got it? Yellow, right? Because yellows are all about being valued. Their thing is always about being It's true, yeah. So it's not you, it's your yellow. You see what I'm saying? This is where we're going. It's the colour, it's not you. Okay? And then the final one, the emotion is depression. Depression is loss or fear of failure. So in this theme, they can't understand why something happened. They're going over and over it in their minds and they're dwelling on it. Who would that be? What colour? It's the blue, right? So what I found in my work was most people that came with PTSD, depression, were blue. Very strong blues. The blue has the skill of thinking. They think until the problem is solved, right? The problem is they do that when it's not necessary, right? When they get stuck with something, they do the same. So it's usually the blues that you'll find that will get depression. So the yellows get hurt because they feel that they're being treated unfairly. They're undeserving, right? I'm just trying to think of a scenario with that. Right, so a yellow. This isn't the scenario, but just so you get the gist. So my wife, she's a very good cook, right? So when she cooks, it always presented perfectly because she's got a bit of yellow and blue, right? Blue are the high standard. So when I'm eating it, I'll say, "I think that's really nice." Halfway through, she'll go, "Do you like it then?" Right? Because her yellow is looking for a little bit more recognition. It gives her the buzz, okay? Okay, so just to check that you got them right. Right, so what does that tell you about how you can anticipate the way you're going to respond to situations? You see? So you can also anticipate how other people will respond to situations based on you observing what colour they are, right? And you'll be amazed at how much you can observe about what colour people are by the clothing they wear, etc., etc. You know, like analyticals, they like to wear dark clothing. The expressive, the yellows, they like to wear bright clothing. And you'll see that. You know, they give off a different... yeah. So there's a lot that can be seen. Okay. What time is it? 8:15. Okay. Everybody all right to carry on? Yeah? Okay. So what about IQ then and EQ? How does that fit into the picture? Does being clever make any difference to this then? Not at all. It doesn't. It doesn't. So one of the things I find, because I do coaching with execs as well, is that they quite often they're red or blue who shoot up to the top of the company. They're not always the best at listening, right? They're not necessarily the best at growing. So they're good at what they're good at. But when you're at the top of a company, it's also about the people. We've had this conversation, haven't we? It's also about the people. So if you get up there and you're not very good at taking the people with you, you'll think you're doing a great job, but are you? Right? And I mean, I've always gone up with police force, but that's one of the big problems with some of these organisations now. There's too much red up there. It's out of balance. Those colours, if you want the perfect collaboration, you'll have all of those colours. And I've worked on teams where you've had all of the colours. Probably a bit like this crew. This crew that we're using tonight that are working with us, they're a bit too much blue in there. But but actually they all work very well. They all work very well together. So okay, so we're going to take this forward a little bit just to reinforce the message. So you've got these three people who are very happy together, right? You've got Tom the vegan, right? You've got Susie, who happens to be Polish. That's irrelevant, but I just thought I'd put that in. And you've got Mo the Muslim, okay? And they're walking down the road having a good time. And then all of a sudden, they pass a fence and somebody has put a pig's head on top of a fence. Right? Not very nice. Right? Mo immediately thinks that pig's head was put there to offend him because he's Muslim. His emotion is anger. Right? Tom, the vegan, feels very sorry for the pig, obviously. Right? And his emotion is more anxiety, thinking about what happened to the pig and who killed it, etc., etc. Right? Susie has a totally different emotion. She's actually worried about her friends being upset. Doesn't like what she's seen, but isn't suffering an emotion about what she has seen. So yet again, we've got a single situation where three different people having three different responses based on their beliefs about the situation. I'm making the point now. We have to look at what the beliefs are if we're going to understand the behaviour, the thinking and the behaviour. And if you do, it really isn't that complex. And you've just shown that because you answered all those questions right. It's not that complex. Okay. So, this is how we help you understand how thinking works. So, when you're reacting to a situation, right, they'll tell you the general talk is that it's a trauma that's created your problem or something like that, or your parents, your socialization, etc., right? Well, we're now showing you that it's a little bit more than that. There's three things that are affecting the way you respond to a situation. There's your wiring. You now realize your wiring has a part to play, right? Whether you're green, blue, or a combination, blah, blah, blah. There is then your socialization and culture. And then there's also the media and the ongoing socialization, this stuff that we keep reading in the press that says gloom and doom, etc., etc. Yes, it all has an effect on us. So those three things, we call them the 1, 2, 3 of how you see. They create the expectations that you're projecting into your environment. Okay? If those expectations are flexible, right? So you get a situation and they can be flexible in that situation, happy days. If those expectations that are projected are inflexible, then you'll then move into the emotion, inflation. And that then creates more difficulty, much more difficulty in that situation. So the key is, if you have knowledge of this, of how it works, then you can make it more flexible. Because it's not always inflexible. It's just some of the time it's inflexible. I'm not telling you, because it's not every situation you have a problem with, is it? It's just some situations. So you're already doing this already. I'm not teaching anything new. It's just that you're not doing it consistently. I might have made that point before. So the idea is learn more about it so that you can be more flexible in the way you respond to situations and you live a longer life. I'll show you why you live a longer life. Is that makes sense so far? If you're managing a team, right, notice this says expectation alignment model, right? If you're managing a team, you now know that you want to keep these expectations flexible. So if they're due to finish at 5 o'clock and you tell them at 5 to 5 that they've got to stay late, you know what kind of response you're going to get. If you can tell them earlier in the day, right, look, tough one came in, we're going to have to stay late, then at least they've got time to make plans so that it's not, it's not a surprise to them. That makes sense? So this isn't just about you. This is also about how you manage teams and manage people. If you're doing it well, you're managing the expectations. If you're getting a lot of friction, then you're not. That's how it works. Everybody with me so far? Good. Okay. So this is the bit of genius. Unfortunately, it's not mine, right? But I've amended it so you can understand it more easily. So this was from Albert Ellis. Yes, it's been out since the 1960s. Everybody I've ever helped with mental health, I've taught this model, right? And then if you carry it around with you and you continue to use it, you will not have a mental health problem. You'll learn to manage things better, literally, right? So first of all, it says that there's 3 ways of responding to any situation. There's indifference, where you're not fussed. There's preference, where you have expectations, but they're flexible. Doesn't mean you think something's great that you don't want to happen, but you accept that you may not get what you want. And then there's the third one, the absolute should or must. The absolute should or must, right? That's where you're insisting what happens in your environment, right? Insisting what happens in your environment. Which one do you think causes the problem? The last one, okay? So, notice in the preference, there are no consequences. Notice in the absolute should, there are consequences, and we call those the beast, right? So everybody who reacts to a situation here, when I say react to it, the situation doesn't meet your expectations. If it meets your expectations, you don't even notice. You think it's great, right? It's when it doesn't meet your expectations that you move into this thing called the beast, right? The beast is happening all at the same time. This is a process that you go through when you experience an emotion. It's not just one thing, it's many things. And we can then understand that. So first of all, there's thinking, right? It generates thinking. And we can tell from the emotion what thinking it generates. Right? I can show you that. You'll have the emotion, which is the theme you see, and the feeling. The theme and the feeling is the emotion. And then you will also have symptoms, which is the cortisol and adrenaline that's moving through you because you've told yourself that whatever's happening here should not be happening. You see, your brain can't see what you see. All it sees is what you tell it. You see, it gives it some electrical communication. She needs some more cortisol. Why does she just give her the cortisol? So you're going to get that boost regardless, just because of what you're telling yourself. This is a really important phrase. What are you telling yourself about that situation? That's causing the problem. So You're now in it. The thinking, the symptoms, and the emotion, right? Which means that you've got the discomfort. I usually go, with people, I say, when you're getting the feeling, right? And there's nobody trying to kill you or anything. It's perceived. It's a perceived threat, right? Because it's a perceived threat or something you've perceived that you're angry about and you're getting the feeling, you're now in the process. And I do that so you remember that you're now in the process, okay? So because you're in discomfort, what then happens is your body automatically seeks comfort. The process helps you seek comfort. So you start thinking action tendencies. What can I do? What can I do about this situation, right? And then sometimes the action tendencies build into behavior. That behavior may be related to the circumstances or it may not. So for instance, with me and the dog, right? So I saw the dog, I had the emotion, I had the thinking that this little dog was going to rip me apart, although you weren't thinking about it like that. And then I had the chemical reaction, which was the symptoms, the cortisol and adrenaline, okay? So then I thought about jumping on the wall away from the dog, and then I did it. Or sometimes I don't even think, it just happens. You see? That's the process. So whenever you go into an emotion, that process is going on. Whenever you go into emotion, the process is going on. If you've got somebody at work who's playing up or being difficult, they'll be in that process, in the same process. But they won't necessarily know because they don't really know enough about how this works. But you can manage it once you learn how it works. And the more you manage it, the more consistent you get at doing it. Okay? So the idea is that we don't respond here, we respond with the preference. You already do it. You just don't do it all the time. Okay? So, you can ask me what I've dealt with is probably what I haven't dealt with. Everybody I've taught this, who has that, wants to play the game and listen, wants to do a bit of work and learn, has overcome their problems. And I've done this stuff with eating disorders, you name it. The eating disorders are to do with the compensatory behavior. That makes sense? So some people, they'll have an eating disorder and they manage to overcome the eating disorder, but the demand is still there. So it moves, and it can move into over-exercise or some other problem. That makes sense? So you get some people who they've got the compensation where something's happened at work, and they start drinking, then they give up drinking or give up smoking, then they put on weight or something else. It's always creating other circumstances, right? But you must remember that it's always caused by this, or there was this, and then you've got a habit that you've created because of it. Who's got a late night chocolate problem? Very strange at the moment. Very strange. Not quite worked out why, but I have got one. Okay, everybody good with that so far, yeah? Okay. There's nothing that doesn't solve, because all you're doing is changing the way you think about it so that you don't suffer the beast. That's it. There's nothing it won't solve, as long as you're interested in learning about it. So this is just giving you a bit more on, there's 8 different emotions. Some of them are unrealistic and some of them are realistic. Right? So we're not into here, let's just do some positive thinking, it'll all go away. What we're talking about is realistic thinking, that you have to accept that the world will not always do what you think it should. Right? And if you think like that, if you think constructively like that, then you'll find that you're in a better position. And I keep saying it's something you already do. Because you might respond, if a 5-year-old comes and swears at you and says, it's a 5-year-old. But if somebody your age comes and does it, so offensive, you know what I'm saying? So you're actually choosing who you think is offensive or not, a lot of the time, and the way you respond to them. But I've never had anything that was not covered in the 8 years or 9 years I've been working. I've never had anything that was not covered by those emotions, those particular emotions. Okay? So the thing about emotions is that energy has to move, right? Energy has to move. But when you get stuck, right, with an emotion, that's why you're getting the feeling, right? But when you move into the preference, it's off again, starts moving again. So sometimes you get people who go for this massage and the masseur will say, you need to stop being so anxious or blah, blah, blah. So every time they come back, they're torn up again like this. They forget free. They come back. They're going back like that again. It's because we're not dealing with the root cause. The root cause is always to do with your thinking. So you have to recognize that there is a difference between what is perceived and what is real. Okay? So have you worked it out yet? That a lot of the stuff that you're getting worried about or that you're making a fuss about actually is just perceived. It's not real. Right? So even just recognizing that, I know it's habitually it's always overcome, but even just recognizing that is very helpful for you to start doing that. It's not real, it's perceived. The feeling is real, so you think the thoughts are true, but actually it is still perceived. So you have a lot of power over difficult things. So this is a very interesting slide. So what happens is you've got this real threat apparatus used in perceived threat circumstances. Okay? So the real threat apparatus means that it's the perfect system to help us survive in prehistoric times when there are all these things chasing us and trying to eat us and we have to run into the cave and get away. It's the perfect mechanism. And it has allowed us to get to this point where we can have this conversation in this room as human beings, right? The problem is we're using it in circumstances that it is not designed for. It's not designed to be like that because the windows are a bit dirty, or because somebody calls you a name, or because you don't know whether somebody likes you or not. All right? It's not designed for that. But we use it in that way, and we suffer because we don't realize that. So what happens is in that situation, this is just a little bit more about how this belief works. You've picked up on some emotion, some information in your environment. Nobody else might have picked up on it, but you have, right? And you have an emotional interpretation, right? So you're getting the anxiety, the anger, or something else like that. And that's when the fun starts, because you then start to escalate it and you start to think negatively, negative inferences, and you accept them. They're not challenged, right? So then you then move into assumption. He really doesn't like me, right? You move into the assumption, and then that becomes your perspective. And then within a few moments, you're now in this delusion where you're completely sold on what you believe in that moment. So you're actually wearing the goggles in your own delusion, right? And other people around you might think, what's up with them then? But you're still in it. Or you may have groups of people in it. When you're working in a company, you can sometimes get, the boss is trying his best, right? And you'll get the team who've got that boss, he don't like me. He hates me, the boss does, all this sort of stuff. And you're thinking, well, that's not how I think about them. But they're in that delusion where they think they do. And this is how this mechanism has the ability to convince you of its reality because it's for real threats. So it wants to convince you of its reality. You see? But the problem is it's perceived, but you don't realize because nobody tells you that you can do that, but you can. So sometimes you'll see people who are in that delusion for a long time, for years. And they're still functioning, but they're still in a delusion. It might be about the way they look. It might be about going outside. It might be about many different things, but it's all created by their belief system. Now, when they give it a label, like agoraphobia or something else, and then they don't explain more about the mind, you can see why you get stuck. Okay? Any questions on that? Okay. So, There are some in here who've done a lot of work on thinking, so this is really about them. But it's just to understand that when you're in these emotions, you'll notice that you're suffering. You're suffering more, right? As you learn to manage them, you suffer less, right? And you also become more conscious of yourself. There's more to it than meets the eye. They even, you may not be into frequency, but they even know now, they talk about, if you want to research it, how to measure your frequency when you're in these types of emotions. The highest frequency is authenticity, apparently, right? Which is where you're not worrying about what people think. You're just happy to be yourself. You don't need to do this or need to do that to be okay. You're just happy to be yourself. That's the highest frequency. So you're moving from this limited mindset into an expansive mindset, right? There's another one here that says the same. Now, what I haven't had time to talk to you everything about that slide I said to you that Albert Ellis did, but you'll see that I get a lot of people who come with symptoms of sickness or other things because of the way they're thinking. This cortisol thing is not meant to be a tap that you have on 24 hours a day, but some of us have it on so much that it has other effects on our bodies, right? So when I was in my 30s, I was a detective. I was unfortunately burning the candle both ends. I wasn't sleeping enough. I was going to work and then staying out all night and doing, partying and all this sort of stuff. And I started to get gout. I started to get head problems where I was scratching my head all the time. It was all because too much cortisol, right? And these things can be managed, but these things have other effects. They do affect your health and other stuff. So you have to realize how that works. Just take 5 then, and we'll carry on. I just want to make sure we can finish.